Her attorney demanded 80% of everything and threatened to destroy me. My wife smiled like victory was guaranteed. I sat silent while they talked. What they didn't know, I've been 5 steps ahead, and her betrayal was about to cost her everything she thought she'd won. My name is Jonathan Reed. I'm 62, and I've spent 34 years turning prefabricated housing from a punchline into a legitimate industry. Reed Modular Systems now holds 17 patents and employs over 400 people. Started in my garage in 1991. Now we're worth more than I ever imagined. The conference room smelled like expensive leather. Cameron Blake sat across from me in a charcoal suit that probably cost $3,000. Isabella was beside him, red lipstick perfect, legs crossed like she was posing for a magazine cover. Jonathan, Blake said, sliding a folder across the table. Let's be adults. Your wife is entitled to 80% of all marital assets. That includes Reed Modular Systems, the Idaho property, and the Quick Build Foundation patent. I didn't touch the folder, just looked at him. 80%, I said slowly. Mrs. Reed contributed significantly to the company's success, Blake continued. Her marketing expertise, her connections, her affair with the delivery driver from Lawrence. I interrupted quietly. That contribution. Isabella's coffee cup stopped midair. She didn't look at me, just stare at the table. Blake barely paused. Personal matters aside, Mr. Reed, community property law is clear. You can cooperate and retain some dignity, or we can drag this through court and destroy everything you built. Your reputation, your company, your legacy. He leaned forward. We'll destroy you. Your choice. I opened the meeting log, signed my name with the same pen I'd used on our marriage certificate 26 years ago. Then I looked at both of them and smiled. Noted, I said. They had no idea that 3 years ago, when Isabella started spending suspicious time in Portland with her consultant, I'd quietly restructured company assets. Legal moves. Offshore trusts. Holdings that don't show up in joint tax returns. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. They left confident. I left quiet. Andrew was waiting in my truck in the parking garage. 32, senior engineer of the company, the only family member who'd chosen honesty. How bad, he asked. Bad enough that your mother thinks she's won. He handed me a flash drive. 47 recordings. Every conversation she had with Blake. Every call with that driver. Everything. I pocketed it. Thank you, Dad. I should have told you sooner. I kept hoping I was wrong. I squeezed his shoulder. You told me when it mattered. That's all that counts. Driving home past the neighborhoods my company built, I thought about Isabella's confident smile. About Blake's threats. About the 80% they thought they'd already claimed. Some structures collapse loudly. Others just settle. Quietly. Inevitably. I was about to teach them the difference. 2 days after the meeting, Isabella posted a photo on social media. Wine glass in hand. That smug smile she wore like armor. Caption. Sometimes the strongest move is walking away from chaos before it touches you. She tagged her friend Monica, who always laughed too loud at Isabella's jokes. I didn't comment. Didn't react. Just saved the screenshot with a timestamp. That same evening, I sat across from Gerald Kim in a quiet cafe off Lexington. Gerald was the kind of lawyer who didn't advertise. Clean cut, understated tie, the type who sipped tea like time bent around him instead of the other way around. You really let them lead with the quick build patent? Gerald asked, setting his cup down with precision. They were proud of it, I said. Isabella thinks it's still mine. Gerald smiled slightly. And it's not. Not on paper. Not since we restructured Reed Modular's assets 5 years ago through Cascade Trust Holdings. Fully private. Isolated. Never tied back to the main company on public filings. IRS clean. Gerald opened a manila folder, revealing a notarized letter dated, sealed, time-stamped. The patent was legally transferred here, he said, tapping the document, to a third-party design incubator. The revenue stream rerouted. Not fraudulent, just preemptive. I leaned back. So, when they file claiming I own it, they're filing with misinformation, Gerald said. The asset she listed doesn't legally exist in your name. Their case gets significantly weaker when this surfaces. They won't know until discovery. Exactly. Gerald closed the folder. She's building a bonfire with wet wood. I watched steam rise from my coffee. What about the Idaho property? Also transferred. Different trust. Same structure. The lake house she thinks is joint property. Hasn't been marital asset for 3 years. It's under Andrew's name through a family trust you established when he turned 30. And she signed off on it. I said, remembering the paperwork. She did. Didn't read it, apparently. Just signed where a lawyer told her to. Gerald's expression shifted to something colder. I've seen a lot of high-conflict divorces, Jonathan. Most people panic. You look surgical. She wanted war. I said quietly. She's getting architecture. Every line deliberate. The irony wasn't lost on me. Isabella always thought my strength was in design, the aesthetic side. She never understood that real architecture isn't what you see. It's what you reinforce when nobody's looking. The steel under the stone. The foundations that hold when everything else shakes. When I left the cafe, the evening air had that early spring bite. I walked to my truck, pulled out my phone, not to check her social media, but to reread something I'd saved years ago. The original clause buried in the first Cascade filing. It wasn't just the patent. That holding company controlled something else Isabella didn't know she'd touched. I looked up at the crosswalk light, still red, and allowed myself a small smile. It had begun, and she'd walked right into it, stilettos first. The silence broke 3 days later, but not from me. Isabella's high-rise attorney suite got its first jolt at 10:47 a.m. when a paralegal came running down the corridor waving a brown envelope like it was on fire. The addressee was Cameron Blake, Esquire. Inside, a formal letter from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Subject line, request for reevaluation and clarification of beneficial ownership in pending asset dispute. Quick Build Foundation Patent US, 7824, AJ. It wasn't sent from my desk. Not from Gerald. This came directly from a quiet request Gerald made during our meeting. One that triggered an internal audit on the filings submitted in Isabella's divorce petition. Because the moment they listed that patent under my name in a legal claim, they walked into federal territory. By noon, 3 junior associates were locked in Blake's small conference room, laptops open, sweating over a mistake they hadn't made but now had to explain. Blake's assistant, a woman named Jennifer who once bragged about never losing a high-asset divorce, was heard muttering, "Why wasn't this flagged in disclosure review?" "Because you were too busy playing offense to check your footing." The USPTO letter included 5 attachments. Transfer history, holding structure, beneficiary records, and a line that turned Blake's confidence into concern. Current beneficial ownership resides under non-contested designation, transferred on recorded date, unrelated to parties in dispute. Translation, you can't fight for what doesn't belong to the battlefield. Still, Isabella wasn't worried at first. She assumed it was a hiccup, something her legal team could smooth over. She was too high on imagined victory to smell smoke. Meanwhile, I was in my office, sketching foundation variations for a community center project in Boise. My phone buzzed twice. Gerald, then my accountant Lorraine. I let both go to voicemail. When you build something, you don't rush. You let it settle. Let the structure breathe before tightening bolts. Same with traps. You don't slam the door too early. You let them get comfortable first. By 3 p.m., Blake personally called the patent office for clarity. He was told politely but firmly that any misrepresentation of ownership in court filings could be subject to formal inquiry. That phrase alone sent him into damage control mode. He knew better than to challenge federal audit language with bravado. Now he needed to explain to Isabella that her prize asset had just turned radioactive. She didn't take it well. According to my friend still on the company's admin staff, Isabella stormed into Blake's office that afternoon, waving her phone, demanding to know why some low-level bureaucrat thinks they can interfere with my divorce. One of the interns muttered that the patent transfer looked legitimate. She nearly bit his head off. By the time the letter reached the firm's internal counsel, whispers had started. Blake's misstep was no longer just a hiccup. It was a potential breach of fiduciary duty. Junior partners began copying files to private drives. The paralegal who'd archived our first meeting, Tim, was reassigned without explanation. The firm was circling wagons around themselves, not their client. And me? I hadn't even submitted a formal response to Isabella's petition yet. No motion, no rebuttal, no headline-worthy quotes. Just silent vacuum. Silence makes people nervous, especially people who think they're winning. That evening, Andrew stopped by my house. He looked tired. "Mom called me 4 times today," he said, dropping into the chair across from my desk, screaming about patent office interference, asking if I knew anything about transfers, accusing you of hiding assets. What did you tell her? I asked. That I'm an engineer, not a lawyer, and she should ask her attorney. He paused. Dad, she's spiraling. She actually threatened to cut me out of her will. I looked at my son, 32 years old, carrying the weight of a family falling apart, and still choosing integrity over inheritance. Andrew, I said carefully, your mother doesn't have a will. She has debt, a pending divorce, and a lawyer who just discovered his star witness is a liability. He almost smiled. Almost. How much more is coming? He asked. Enough, I said. But it won't be loud. It'll be procedural, document by document, each one removing another brick from the case she thought she'd built. Andrew nodded slowly. She really thought she could just take everything, didn't she? She did, I said, because for 26 years, I let her think I was the kind of man who'd let it happen. What Isabella never learned about architecture is this. It's not about the walls you see. It's about the pressure points, the places you can press without breaking a sweat and still make the ceiling fall. I hadn't been to that side of town in over a decade. The streets had changed. Glass towers replaced the brick buildings I once admired for their honest construction. Everything shimmered with corporate polish now, hollow and cold. But the building I pulled up to, I remembered. 8th and Marlowe, Pierce & Associates. Back in 2009, it was just Pierce Law, a 2-floor practice with peeling paint and loud ambition. Now it stretched 31 stories into the sky, an empire in brushed steel. Catherine Pierce's name was on the elevator directory. Top floor, corner office. I was buzzed in before I finished giving my name. The receptionist, a young woman in a blouse that probably cost more than my first drafting table, led me down a hallway lined with abstract art that looked like stock market anxiety, painted in oils. Her heels clicked like a metronome. Then we reached it. Corner office, frosted glass, minimalist interior. Behind a walnut desk sat Catherine Pierce. Still sharp, still composed, hair grayer than I remembered but eyes just as clear. Jonathan, she said, standing. Her voice was thinner now, tempered by years of boardrooms and battles. It's been a long time. 12 years. I answered, walking in slowly. I didn't sit. Instead, I reached into my coat and pulled out a photograph. An old one. Her father, sitting on the porch of a newly remodeled house. Oxygen tank beside him, wrapped in a flannel blanket. Sunlight hitting him just right. Catherine crouching beside him, trying not to cry. I placed a photo on her desk. She looked at it for a long time, not moving. Then picked it up with both hands like it might dissolve if she didn't hold it carefully. You paid for it, she said quietly. Not just the house, I replied. I rerouted the HVAC, widened the doorways, installed the lift system. Your dad got to spend his last months in dignity. No firm would take his case after the VA, close his file. I didn't do it for payment. I know. She set the photo down, finally looked at me. Not as a visitor, not as a potential threat, but as a man who once carried something that didn't belong to him, just so someone else didn't have to. I also know why you're here, she said. I nodded once. Your firm is representing Isabella. She's listed the patent, the holding structure, the properties. She's using one of your partners as a sword. Blake. She muttered the name like a sour taste. He's sloppy and he's loud. And you haven't filed a response yet. I won't have to, I said. You're smart, Catherine. You know where this is going. She walked to the window, arms folded. The skyline glowed in the distance. She stood there in silence for a full minute. Then, without turning around, she said, You saved my family's dignity. I'll return the favor. When she turned back, her face was different. No longer polite, no longer soft. It was the face of a woman who'd survived a jungle of courtrooms and ambition. Blake's contract has a conflict clause, she said. He never disclosed prior involvement between you and me. That alone is a problem. Add the patent mistake, it's bigger. But the part that really upsets me, she walked to her desk, pulled a drawer, retrieved something, is that he let this play out under my firm's banner without telling me. She held up a file. Our original meeting log from the mediation. Someone had sent her a copy. He used our reputation as cover for a stunt I can't ignore, Catherine said. I finally sat down. You'll remove him? I'll do more than that, she said. But quietly. You don't need a show. You need precision. She looked at me again, and I saw it. Gratitude, mixed with readiness. A sense of debt, yes, but also the willingness to balance it on her terms. Thank you, I said. Jonathan, she replied. Thank you for giving me the time I needed to say goodbye to my father. That was the real gift. Now let me give you something that lasts longer than grief. We didn't shake hands. People who owe each other something real rarely do. Instead, she reached for the photo, slid it into a leather folder, then picked up her phone. Cancel my next 2 appointments, she told her assistant. I have a file to reopen. As I stepped into the elevator, the city felt different, like something heavy had shifted below the surface. And somewhere high above, the scaffolding Isabella was building her false empire on just got its first silent fracture. Catherine worked fast. That same evening, she sat at her desk until nearly midnight. The city outside reduced to yellow lights through tinted glass. The contract was open on her tablet, eyes scanning each clause like a surgeon studying an X-ray. There it was, Clause 7.3b, buried halfway through a 47-page partnership agreement. The kind of clause nobody expects to enforce, until suddenly, it's the only thing that matters. In the event that retained counsel knowingly enters litigation involving a former client or direct beneficiary of a senior partner within a 10-year window, immediate disclosure and potential recusal is required. 10 years. Not 5. Not 7. 10. Jonathan had been in Catherine's personal records since 2009. The remodel, the medical equipment installation, the HVAC work, all documented, paid through her private account. Back then, her firm hadn't even handled divorce cases. Now they were known for gutting marriages and rebuilding survivors. And Cameron Blake, Isabella's attack dog, had signed his partnership agreement just 14 months ago. Eager to climb, hungry for headlines. He'd never run due diligence, never asked if any of Isabella's targets might connect to Catherine personally. He'd been too busy enjoying the front row seat to what he thought was Jonathan's downfall. Catherine buzzed her assistant. I need Gerald Irwin. Tonight. Ethics review. It's urgent. Gerald Irwin, the firm's ethics chair, was many things. Quiet, obsessive, clinically unemotional. He didn't blink when billion-dollar clients tried to buy their way around rules. He also didn't flinch when senior partners brought him trouble, as long as they brought it clean. Catherine forwarded the engagement files before he answered. 10 minutes into the call, Irwin asked one question. Did Blake know about your connection to Reed? He was informed this week. Jonathan came to me directly, and Blake didn't disclose the conflict to litigation support. No. In fact, he doubled down, called Jonathan obsolete in the mediation recording. Irwin didn't reply immediately. She heard typing. Finally, he's compromised the firm. We'll need a formal memo by morning. You'll have it, Catherine said. She hung up, stared at the contract like it had just revealed a secret, then opened a second file. Internal review protocol, the one that activates when a partner's conduct crosses from negligence into liability. Clause 7.3b wasn't just policy. It was a failsafe. The firm needed an emergency brake in case ambition went blind. Blake had just driven through it with his headlights off. At 7:42 the next morning, Catherine summoned Blake to her office. He arrived 5 minutes late, wearing confidence like cheap cologne. She didn't invite him to sit. There's been a conflict of interest violation, she said, handing him a folder. Your client's litigation involves a former client of mine, one whose file is still under protected status. Blake opened the folder, skimmed it. This is from 12 years ago. That's a stretch, Catherine. Clause 7.3b doesn't stretch. It states 10 years and mandates disclosure. You didn't disclose. I didn't know, Blake said. That's not a defense. That's an admission you failed to check. Catherine's voice was ice. Your negligence put this firm at risk. His jaw shifted. So what now? I step aside, hand this to someone else. No, she said calmly. You step aside, and the firm hands you to the review board. Pause. Thick silence, the kind that tastes like rust. You're throwing me under for some relic who couldn't keep his marriage intact. Blake's voice rose slightly. I'm protecting this firm from your carelessness, Catherine said, and from the lawsuit your recklessness nearly bought us. Blake slammed the folder shut. Isabella will be furious. Isabella is no longer our client. Catherine handed him a sealed envelope. Effective immediately, you're suspended from all active litigation. Legal operations has been informed. Formal investigation begins today. Blake stared at the envelope like it might bite him. Then he turned and walked out, door closing hard behind him. The silence that followed felt like pressure releasing. Not relief, not yet, but a clearing of space. Just enough to move the next piece into position. Jonathan hadn't lifted a finger. The system had done it for him. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. Isabella arrived at 9:12, flustered but trying to hide it. Hair too perfect, blouse too crisp, the kind of wardrobe that screams, "I'm fine," when nothing underneath is. There was no audience. Just a windowless conference room, a court reporter with mechanical fingers, and Catherine Pierce seated at the head of the table with 2 files in front of her. One labeled Reed, the other Blake, Ethics. Isabella glanced around like she expected backup. None came. The reporter nodded and began the record. Catherine didn't raise her voice, didn't pace. Just opened the folder and asked the first question in a voice smooth as piano wire. State your name for the record. Isabella Reed. Please confirm you're under oath and aware that all statements today are legally binding. I understand, Isabella said, already irritated. Good. Catherine flipped to page 2. Prior to this meeting, were you made aware that your legal counsel, Mr. Blake, failed to disclose a direct conflict of interest in violation of this firm's operating agreement? Isabella blinked. I wasn't aware of any conflict. He never told me. Did you request clarification from Mr. Blake regarding his relationship to this firm's senior partners before filing your petition? No. Did you approve Mr. Blake's inclusion of the quick build patent in your preliminary asset claim? Yes. He told me it was joint property. Was documentation provided confirming joint ownership? No. Isabella admitted. But I assumed. Catherine held up a hand. Please refrain from assumptions. This is factual deposition, not speculation. Isabella's cheeks flushed. Catherine continued. Are you aware that said patent was transferred out of Mr. Reed's portfolio 5 years ago and placed under Cascade Trust Holdings, an entity with no marital linkage? I wasn't told that. Yet you included it in your petition? My legal team did. Did you review the petition before signing? Yes. Then you were aware your team listed assets not legally tied to the marital estate. Pause. Long one. I guess I was aware, Isabella said quietly. You guess. Or you were aware? I was aware. Catherine made a note. Did you authorize Mr. Blake to apply pressure tactics in mediation, including threats of public exposure, as recorded on March 23rd? I didn't use those exact words. But you authorized the approach? I trusted his judgment. Even after he failed to verify ownership of the primary asset? Silence. Isabella reached for water. Her hand trembled slightly. The glass clicked against a ring. Catherine leaned back. Did you or anyone on your team communicate with media contacts regarding the divorce prior to formal hearings? I made a few comments. Off the record. We have transcripts of direct quotes. Would you like to see them? Isabella didn't answer. Each question after that peeled back another layer. The trust fund rumor she'd leaked. The figure she'd fed a blogger. The social media campaign she'd run to shape public sympathy. All of it came back, itemized, time-stamped, documented. By the time they reached financial disclosures, Isabella looked like a painting melting in the sun. Still recognizable, but distorted. She stopped looking at Catherine. Stopped trying to respond with attitude. Her voice got quiet, flat. The tone that only comes when someone realizes their next move is simply survival. At the end, Catherine closed the file, stood. That will be all. Isabella didn't move. The reporter packed up. Catherine left the room. But Isabella stayed seated, staring at the bare table, hands folded tightly. Her lawyer was gone. Her leverage vaporized. Her power documented and sealed in transcripts. One for the court, one for Jonathan's team. No outburst. No final plea. Just a soft exhale and silence. The kind that doesn't need applause because the collapse was complete. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon, late enough to clear the calendar, early enough to catch people off guard. That's how you handle things when you're cleaning house. No fanfare, no weekend emails. Just one quiet, surgical incision. We met in the old conference room. Not the new glass one with the espresso machine and filtered air, but the oak-paneled one we'd used back when Reed Modular had fewer than 20 employees and my partners still called me John instead of Mr. Reed. The room smelled like leather and old wood. Exactly how legacy should smell. There were 6 of us. The 3 original partners, 2 executive board members, plus Eleanor Santos, our internal counsel, whose poker face had been mistaken for apathy too many times by people who didn't live long enough to regret it. I handed each of them a packet. 42 pages, stapled, not bound. On the front, one phrase, Clause 19C Review and Action. Clause 19C was a protective measure I'd written into the firm's retirement succession plan back in 2010, right after Isabella convinced me to include her name as a non-voting beneficiary. Just in case something happens to you, she'd said, all doe eyes and concern. You work so hard. I want to make sure you're protected. She'd never meant it. What she'd meant was, if you die, I want to own part of the aftermath. And because I was too generous, or too stupid, I'd agreed. Not to voting shares, not to operational control, but to a clause that tied a percentage of retirement disbursement to her name. Non-liquid, long-term, passive. The kind of thing nobody notices until it's time to divide spoils. But Clause 19C allowed for reversal. Quietly, cleanly. Triggered only in cases of malicious interference, public defamation, or active litigation with intent to dissolve or devalue core assets. Isabella had checked all 3 boxes. I gave them 10 minutes to read. No one spoke until Martin, my longest-serving partner who once shared a folding table with me in a construction trailer, looked up. You sure about this? He asked. She listed the firm in her filings. I said, tried to seize intellectual property not connected to her name. Authorized her legal team to pressure this board through misinformation, and did it all with a smile. Martin nodded once. Eleanor added, there's precedent. Clean removal. No risk of appeal. Clause 19C was signed by the full board when drafted and reaffirmed in 2018. She never challenged it. Angela, our youngest board member, spoke up. You don't owe us an explanation, Jonathan. She made herself a liability. Then we voted. Unanimous. 6-0. Isabella Reed was officially removed from the firm's retirement clause, stripped from internal ledgers, marked as disassociated due to breach of fiduciary alignment. Cold language. Just the way bylaws like it. Eleanor handed me a single page. I signed it. Effective immediately, she said, placing the signed form into a legal envelope. It was done in 9 minutes. Her name no longer existed in our system. Her claim to passive income gone. No sunset clause, no prorated payout. Just a razor-clean cut. And here's the detail Isabella never considered. The clause was retroactive. Every distribution earmarked for her since litigation began was now legally redirected back to the firm's discretionary reserve. That evening, as Isabella likely sat in her condo, sipping wine she still assumed she could afford, our internal server updated at 5:01 p.m. sharp. Her name blinked off the digital ledger like a light going out. She didn't hear it, but I did. It sounded like justice being quietly filed. Andrew stopped by my house that night. He looked lighter somehow, like weight had lifted. The vote went through, he asked. Unanimous, I said. He sat down heavily. She's going to lose it when she finds out. She already has, I said. She just doesn't know it yet. Dad, Andrew said carefully, do you think she ever actually loved you? Or was it always just about what you could provide? I thought about that. About 26 years of marriage. About the early days when we were building something together. Or at least I thought we were. I think she loved the idea of what I could become, I said finally. And when I became it, she loved what it could give her. But me? The man underneath all of it. I shook my head. I don't think she ever saw him. Andrew nodded slowly. I'm glad you're finally free. Almost, I said. Almost free. The dress was deep emerald silk, tailored in Milan, cost more than most people's monthly salary. I knew because I bought it 3 years ago when Isabella said she needed something special for the annual Preservation Society gala. The irony was, she chose that exact dress to wear to this year's event. The same gala we used to attend together when people still called us the Reeds, like we were a unit. This time she arrived with her new companion, Devin Grant, a self-proclaimed luxury real estate consultant whose credentials seemed to evaporate under any scrutiny. I'd done homework. The man didn't hold a valid license and had exactly one property flipped to his name, his aunt's condo. But Isabella liked accessories. Tonight, Devin wore an expensive blazer and the smug confidence of a man who thought he was climbing social ladders by osmosis. The gala was held at the Riverside Gallery. High ceilings, uncomfortable chairs, the the smell of champagne masking political desperation. The kind of place where people murmur and donations come with business cards. Isabella walked in expecting reverence. Instead, she got side eyes and whispers. One woman, elegant in navy, leaned toward her husband. "Is that the one who lost her attorney mid-case?" He didn't answer, just frowned. Another couple, former friends from the design circuit, gave her a nod so faint it bordered on dismissive. The woman half smiled, but the man whispered, "I heard the board at Reed Modular removed her completely. Cut her out." Isabella kept smiling. She always did. But even that was beginning to slip. Smiles don't land the same when the room doesn't reflect them back. She walked Devin to the bar, ordered something dark and expensive. Devin scanned the room with predatory eyes, calculating who might still be worth impressing. But the crowd had shifted. Conversation stalled when she approached. Laughter softened, then resumed when she passed. Her name had become radioactive. Devin, sensing it, began drifting. First as a step back, then two. By the time Isabella turned to say something, he was mid-conversation with a local lifestyle blogger known for posting more selfies than substance. Isabella called his name once. He pretended not to hear. She didn't call again. So she stood there, just off-center from the chandelier's light, half a glass of wine in one hand, posture perfect, smile fixed. A statue carved in the shape of what she thought success looked like. And not a single person approached her. From a corner near the silent auction, one of the trustees, an older man with a hearing aid and no filter, asked his companion, "Why is she here without Jonathan?" They were always together. The other guest replied softly, "Divorce. It's gotten ugly." "Ah," the old man said, loud enough to carry. "Explains the desperation perfume." Isabella flinched. Barely visible, but I saw it. I was standing near the east entrance, talking with the gallery director about a potential community project. I hadn't planned to attend, but the director had insisted. Isabella didn't see me. She was too focused on maintaining composure while her world crumbled in real time. A photographer from the local magazine approached a group near the sculpture exhibit. Isabella positioned herself nearby, clearly waiting for her turn in the lens. "Would you like to join the photo?" the photographer asked. But he wasn't looking at her. He was looking past her, at the people behind her. When the flash went off, Isabella wasn't in the frame. She left 10 minutes later. Alone. Outside, the spring wind pulled at her emerald dress. She wrapped her coat tight, heels clicking too loud on the marble steps. The car she'd requested was late. She stood at the curb, one hand shielding her face from the wind. Not because of cold, but because she'd finally understood what it meant to be seen for what she'd become. Present, polished, and utterly unwanted. I watched from the gallery entrance as her car finally arrived. She got in without looking back. The door closed. The car pulled away, and I realized something. Victory doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it just feels like watching something that was already broken finally stop pretending to be whole. I went back inside. There was still work to do, projects to discuss, a future to build, one that no longer included her shadow. The final mediation was scheduled for Tuesday morning. Neutral office downtown, clinical and quiet, no branding on the walls. That's how real power works. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up clean, signs documents, and leaves before anyone knows the wind changed direction. Catherine Pierce was already seated when I arrived. Folder open, fountain pen resting on a leather portfolio. A carafe of water, 2 glasses. No pageantry. "Jonathan," she said, rising briefly. "Catherine." I nodded. I hadn't worn a tie in years, but today I wore the black one. Not because I had to, but because Isabella would have hated it. "Too plain," she used to say. "Not ambitious enough." "Isabella won't be joining us," Catherine said, almost apologetically. "I figured," I said. She gestured to the folder. "We finalized everything last night. The revisions are straightforward. You retain full ownership of Reed Modular Systems and all related entities. The Idaho property and the lake cabin revert to your name immediately. Cascade Trust Holdings remains untouchable, and the quick build patent is permanently disassociated from all marital claims." "And her settlement?" I asked, though I already knew. Catherine slid the papers toward me. "A single buyout. Non-recurring lump sum. No royalties. No residuals. 5% of her original demand." I didn't flinch, just nodded. She agreed to that. I asked. She signed under advisement of her new representation. Catherine said. I believe her exact words were, just make it end. That tracked. The woman who'd strutted into mediation 6 months ago, demanding 80%, who'd threatened to destroy me, who'd smiled like she'd already won, had quietly tapped out. No final attack. No Hail Mary. Just fatigue. Probably already spinning a new version of the story for her friends. The victim narrative. How she was taking the high road. Catherine handed me the pen. You built it, she said quietly. You protected it. Now you own it without compromise. The moment ink touched paper, I didn't feel triumph. Not really. There was no rush of victory, just stillness. The kind that comes when you've outlasted fire, storm, and whispers. I signed page after page in steady silence. When it was done, Catherine placed the documents in a locked briefcase and stood. No press releases, she said. No leaks, I replied. We shook hands. Firm, brief, final. As I walked toward the elevator, a junior associate, probably on loan from another floor, stood by the coffee station, pretending to stir something she wasn't drinking. She looked at me, then at the closed conference room door. Was that the Reed case? She asked Catherine quietly. Yes, Catherine said. The young woman blinked. Did she really think she could break him? Catherine didn't raise her voice. Didn't even look up from her notes. She underestimated the one man who never needed to raise his voice. I stepped into the elevator alone. The door slid shut. No noise, no flash. Just peace. Earned, not granted. And behind me, a chapter Isabella thought she'd write closed in handwriting that was never hers to begin with. 15 months later, I stood on a construction site in Eastern Oregon, watching the first modular units being placed for a new affordable housing development. 60 families would live here. Decent homes, energy efficient, built with a quick build system that Isabella had tried to claim as hers. Andrew stood beside me, tablet in hand, reviewing installation specs. 33 now, confident, no longer carrying the weight of a family war. Foundation looks solid, he said. Always start with the foundation, I replied. We'd expanded Reed Modular by 40% in the past year. 3 new patents, 2 manufacturing facilities, contracts in 5 states. The company Isabella tried to gut was thriving in ways she'd never imagined. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to Arizona. Smaller city, quieter life. Working as a marketing consultant for a local real estate firm. The emerald dress probably still hung in her closet, a relic of a life she tried to steal and lost. I didn't wish her ill. I just didn't think about her much at all anymore. Dad, Andrew said, breaking my thoughts. I've been meaning to tell you something. What's that? I'm engaged. Sarah from a Portland office. We've been seeing each other for 8 months. I looked at my son, saw the nervousness in his eyes, the hope. That's wonderful, I said. She's good people. She is, he said. And I wanted to ask if you'd be okay with me using Grandma's ring. The one you gave me after the divorce. My mother's engagement ring. The one I'd retrieved from the safe deposit box the day the settlement was finalized. The one I'd told Andrew was his when he found the right person. It's yours, I said. Your grandmother will be proud. Andrew smiled. Real and unguarded. We stood there as the crane lifted another housing unit into place. Watching something being built instead of torn down. Creating instead of destroying. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine Pierce. Just 3 words. Congratulations on Portland. News traveled fast. We just won a major contract to design a mixed-use development in downtown Portland. $20 million project. The kind of work that changes a company's trajectory. I texted back. Thank you for everything. Her reply came quickly. You did the work. I just removed the obstacles. That evening, I drove home past neighborhoods my company had built. Streets full of families, kids playing in yards, lights coming on in windows as the sun set. This was the empire Isabella had tried to claim. Not the money, not the patents, not the properties. This, the actual work, the homes, the foundations that held families together. She'd wanted the crown without understanding the kingdom. I pulled into my driveway, newer house, smaller than the one we'd shared. But mine, fully, completely mine. Inside, I poured a glass of whiskey, sat on the deck, overlooking the valley. The spring air had that clean smell, fresh and full of possibility. Somewhere in Arizona, Isabella was probably telling people she'd walked away from a toxic situation. probably believed it too. And that was fine. Let her have that story. I had the truth. And the company. And my son's respect. And projects that would outlive us both. Some men measure success in what they acquire. Others measure it in what they build and who they build it for. I built something that lasted. Something honest. Something that didn't need lies or theft to survive.